everybody, Ryan Medora here, and welcome to another bass lesson. This is going to focus primarily on this hand, technique, what we're doing with it, ways to navigate the fretboard, and it's going to be focused on a little exercise that will hopefully help you improve your technique with your right hand or your plucking hand, because if you're left-handed, it might be that hand. But for me, I'm going to refer to this as my right hand because that's what it is in my world. And a lot of times we talk about this as our plucking hand. So I don't love that word. We're going to maybe discuss some other vocab, but I'm also going to give you an exercise. So if you want to get tab notation, anything like that, or support what we do here at this channel, head over to my Patreon page. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about this hand because we usually refer to this as our plucking hand. I don't love this word because it implies kind of this like upward motion, a weird up pluck, which I think is kind of originated from the world of upright bass. But on like an electric bass like this, if we think about plucking, it often implies the incorrect motion. We really want to kind of just glide across the strings. It's a nice, friendly, feminine word, I think, gliding across the strings as opposed to plucking. But what we really want to do is we want to be able to play a string, glide through it, and come to rest on the string behind it. Now, because of that, we want to find a good place for our thumb to live. And a lot of people use different techniques. Some people like to use the floating thumb technique where we bounce between strings. Some people keep it here on the pickup. Some people like to play with their thumb and their fingers up here, doing some palm muting. Some people like to use the pick. There are a lot of different techniques, slap and pop even. Why? Man, we can't forget those guys. But I think that a great way to establish good technique and to have this gliding motion rather than the plucking motion is to understand how it's best to move our thumb from the pickup to maybe our E string. Maybe we want to float a little bit, but not necessarily all the time, and how that can really improve our economy of motion. So you'll see that if I were to play something that is, I guess, across all strings, where I'm playing my open E, then maybe this E on the 7th fret, and then the octave here, I want to be able to kind of go between all of these strings. That's going to give you full range across all the 4 strings. And if you happen to be playing a 5-string bass, you can choose whether or not you want to anchor on the pickup with your thumb or on the lowest string like your B string. And in reality, you may find yourself like bopping back and forth or floating back and forth. But a great thing to do to practice this technique is to kind of practice across the different octaves of E, and then to kind of move around a little bit on the fretboard between different octave motions. So one thing that I like to do is move between this E on the 7th fret and its octave, then down to D, then down to C, and then to come over to my to come over to my A note here on the open E string and play there. So you'll see that I like to create a series of octave movements. And I'm giving it some groove. I'm kind of pushing, I'm adding some syncopation, which is fun. And I can kind of play around with how I do this, but the key thing that I'm doing is I'm keeping my thumb either here on the pickup or jumping over to my E string. I'm not going all the way to my A string for when I hit the octaves because I'm doing this motion so quickly that I want to be able to move back. If you find yourself playing here and then bringing your thumb closer to the higher strings, you're going to get caught up a little bit. You might not be able to do things like raking, which is another bass technique, and you might kind of find that you're using a little too much motion. So we want to kind of think about economy of motion here, not make our thumb float all over the place, but maybe just have a couple motions where it might jump back and forth between the pickup and the open string. Now, everybody has different ideas about what to do with this hand technique-wise, but I've found that this works for me, and I hope that this works for you as well, just kind of limiting our float between these two positions, the pickup and the E string. Sometimes I like to challenge myself by not floating my thumb at all, keeping it here stationary on the pickup. And you can can see that in a way that kind of frees me up to be able to do those other moves, like raking and kind of gliding across all the strings. And I don't have to pop back when I go to play notes on my E string. So if I want to go lower with this bass line and maybe take advantage of my open E, you know, I can all of a sudden do that because I'm not having to move my thumb around at all. So there are a lot of ways you can play with this, but I would suggest that a great way to get started is just by understanding that your thumb controls a lot of what this hand is doing. And when you're using your index and middle finger and trying to alternate between the two, you know, you don't want your thumb to get in the way. And even though it can be really helpful with muting sometimes, knowing that just being able to pop it between these two places, the pickup and the E string, that's a really good option to have. It's not always necessary. And you may not also always want to float all the way forward because you might want to do faster moves from the G and the D string to your lower string. So a great exercise, again, is kind of just picking a chord progression. Like this is just kind of like an E minor chord progression where I'm focusing on octaves, because that builds in string jumps. You know, I'm kind of hopping over the D string a lot, and I'm making sure that I'm using the full range of the instrument. So it's giving this hand a good workout in terms of like how it synchronizes across all the strings. And you can see that I'm kind of building in little moments where I'm playing over my E string as well. So we're really dealing with the full spectrum of all four strings here. And again, you can adapt this to the 5 string as well if you'd like. So just think about this. The next time you pick up your bass and you're thinking about what this hand is doing, we're gliding over a string, coming to rest on a string behind it. We want to make sure that our thumb position is kind of, if you know, stationary in one place, or if we are going to float it, maybe we don't float all the way all the time. And know that it's really important to gain full of range of motion across all the strings and to really be aware of developing good technique with this hand as much as we do with this one. So I hope you dug this. Again, if you want to get tab notation, anything like that for this exercise, please head over to my Patreon page. You can find it there. And please check out the other videos here at this channel. So have a great day, everybody. Happy practicing and keep it groovy.